The royal palace stood high on the shining cliffs of the alien world. But inside its tallest tower there was no joy. The halls were silent, the servants moved with lowered heads, and the guards kept their eyes down, for behind a set of golden doors, the heir to the throne, the beloved princess of the empire, was dying. She lay on a bed made of silver and silk, her skin pale and her breathing weak. Once she had been bright and full of life, a symbol of hope for her people. Now her voice was only a whisper, and her body trembled with every breath. The palace healers worked day and night, mixing strange potions, chanting ancient words, and using technology far beyond human knowledge, yet nothing worked. The princess only grew weaker with each passing day. The queen, her mother, sat beside her, holding her cold hand. She had begged the gods, offered riches, and even promised her throne in exchange for her daughter's life. But no one answered. The nobles whispered in the halls, saying the empire was cursed. The princess's life was tied to the future of their world. And now that future was slipping away. Outside the palace, the people wept. They lit candles in the streets and sang prayers, hoping their voices would reach the stars. The princess was not just a royal figure to them. She was the heart of their nation. Her death would mean more than sorrow. It would mean the fall of their spirit. In the chamber, the air was heavy with fear. The princess opened her eyes slowly, her golden pupils glowing faintly like dying stars. She looked at her mother and whispered, "I do not want to leave you." The queen's tears fell onto her hand, and she said, "You will not, my child. I will find a way. I will not let you go." But her voice trembled, and the princess could hear the doubt behind her words. The healers bowed low and said, "Your Majesty, we have tried every cure known to our people. Nothing can be done. The sickness has taken root in her blood." Their voices carried shame, and their hands shook, for they knew they had failed. The queen rose in fury, her eyes burning. "Then bring me someone who can save her. I do not care where they come from. I do not care if it is forbidden. My daughter will not die." That night, the council gathered in secret. They whispered of a legend of blood that carried fire, not alien, but human. For centuries, the story had been dismissed as myth. But now, with the princess dying, it was all that remained. The queen listened in silence, her face pale but her heart fierce. She made her choice. She would call upon the one race her people mistrusted most. The humans' words spread like wildfire. The people gasped, for humans were seen as warriors, destroyers, beings who thrived on chaos. But in their desperation, the royal family had no choice. Somewhere beyond the stars, a human warrior was summoned. His blood, they believed, might hold the power to do what no alien medicine could. The princess, half asleep, heard the whispers. In her dreams, she saw a figure walking through fire. His face hidden, but his presence strong. She felt something she had not felt in many weeks' hope. It was faint, fragile, but it was there. She clutched her blanket with weak fingers and whispered, "Please, let it be true." The palace waited in silence. The guards watched the skies. The people prayed in fear and wonder. And in the highest chamber, the dying princess closed her eyes once more, not knowing if she would live to see the dawn, not knowing that destiny was already moving toward her, carried in the veins of a human stranger. The alien palace was filled with fear and whispers. But hope flickered when the queen's command was sent beyond the stars, somewhere in the void, far from the alien world. A human answered the call. He was a warrior, scarred by battles, his eyes carrying the weight of countless wars. His name was spoken quietly among soldiers, for he had survived where others had fallen. The human warrior did not come in golden ships or with banners of power. His vessel was simple, worn from years of fighting. It entered the alien skies like A shadow, silent but strong. The alien guards on the palace walls tightened their grip on their weapons, for to them, humans were unpredictable. Dangerous, too wild to be trusted. Yet this one was different. He had come not for conquest, but for something greater. When he stepped out, the air grew heavy. His tall frame moved with purpose. Each step echoing in the grand courtyard. The aliens stared at him with suspicion. Some muttered insults under their breath, calling him a beast. Others turned their faces away, yet his gaze never wavered. He walked forward like a man who carried storms inside him. The queen descended from the palace steps to meet him, her face proud but her eyes desperate. She looked at him with both hope and doubt. "Human warrior," she said, her voice trembling, "my daughter lies dying. No cure of our kind has saved her. They say your blood carries fire. Will you help us?" The warrior studied her for a moment, then bowed his head slightly. His voice was deep. "Steady. I am no healer, Your Majesty. My blood is no miracle, but if there's even a chance it can save her, then I will give it freely." His words silenced. The courtyard, the nobles who had gathered, gasped. Some in anger, some in awe. The guards surrounded him as he entered the palace. Their hands hovered over their blades, ready to strike if he made a wrong move. But he did not resist. He walked. With calm strength, his boots echoed against the marble floors. Every alien he passed stepped aside, their eyes filled with fear and curiosity. Inside the chamber, the princess lay pale and fragile. Her breath was shallow, her golden eyes half closed. The healers stood nearby, whispering doubts. They did not believe in human legends. To them, this was madness. But the queen silenced them with a single glare. The warrior moved to the princess's bedside. For the first time, his face softened. He looked at her as if she were not a princess, not an alien, but simply a dying girl in need. He knelt beside her and placed his hand gently upon hers. Her skin was cold, but she stirred faintly at his touch. "She is weak," the queen whispered, "and fading fast. Do what you must, human." The warrior reached into his belt and drew a small blade. The guards flinched. He did not raise it in violence. Instead, he pressed the blade against his palm and cut his skin. Dark red blood welled from the wound. It gleamed in the torchlight. Thick and powerful, the healers gasped, their alien eyes widening. "His blood," one whispered, "it burns like fire." The warrior leaned closer to the princess. His voice was low, almost a vow. "If my blood can keep your heart beating, then take it." Little one, with care, he let drops of his blood fall onto her lips. For a moment, nothing happened. The chamber was silent. Then the princess stirred. Her weak body shivering as if struck by lightning. Her chest rose sharply. Her golden eyes fluttered open. A faint glow spread across her veins. The healers cried out in shock. "It works! She is responding." The queen covered her mouth with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. The princess's weak voice escaped her lips. "Mother," she whispered, her eyes shifting slowly to the human. "And who is this man?" The queen grasped her daughter's hand, her voice breaking. "He is the reason you are alive, my child. He is the human warrior who came for you." The warrior stood, his palm still bleeding, his expression calm. Yet inside, he felt something shift for the first time in years. He was not simply fighting to survive, he was fighting to save. But as hope filled the queen and the princess, shadows stirred in the corners of the room. The nobles exchanged dark glances. Their whispers were filled with envy and fear. For if the human truly had the power to heal, then their traditions, their laws, and their very rule would be threatened. And already, plans were forming in secret hearts to remove him. The chamber was filled with silence, broken only by the faint breath of the princess, her skin, once pale and cold, now carried a faint warmth. A glow traced through her veins like streams of golden light. The healers stared in disbelief, their hands trembling as they clutched their tools. They had tried every cure, every spell, and every machine, but nothing had worked. Now, a few drops of human blood were doing what their entire empire could. Not. The queen's tears fell freely as she held her daughter's hand. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "She lives. She is coming back to me." The guards exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to believe what they were witnessing. The nobles who had gathered in the shadows whispered among themselves, their eyes filled with fear and envy. The warrior still knelt by the princess's side. His wounded hand dripped blood onto the floor. His jaw was tight, his face calm. But inside, he felt the weight of what had just happened. He had shed blood countless times in battle, but never like this. This time, it had not destroyed, it had saved. The princess opened her eyes, weak but steady. Her golden pupils met his gaze. For a moment, the chamber disappeared, and there was only the fragile girl and the human who had given her life. She whispered softly, her voice fragile as wind. "You saved me." The warrior lowered his head, his voice deep and steady. "It was not I, princess. It was simply my blood. But you are stronger than you know. It is your will that keeps you here." The healers rushed forward, scanning her with glowing devices. Their eyes widened as the readings showed strength returning to her heart, energy flowing through her veins. One of them stammered, "Impossible." Her body accepts his blood. It binds with her cells. She is changing. The words spread quickly through the palace. The alien princess had been saved not by their gods, not by their science, but by a human's blood, by morning. The news reached the people in the streets. Some fell to their knees in awe, praising the miracle. Others spat in fear, whispering that their future was now tied to an outsider. But inside the royal chamber, none of that mattered. The queen leaned close to her daughter and kissed her forehead. "Rest, my child, you will live." Her voice cracked with relief. The princess, though weak, turned her gaze again to the warrior. Her lips trembled as she spoke. "Why would you do this for me? It's a stranger, a foreigner to your kind." Her voice broke with confusion and gratitude. The warrior's eyes softened, shadows of old battles flickering in his mind. Because no one should be left to die when there is still a chance. "I have lost too many in my life. I will not lose another if I can help it." His words carried a weight that silenced the room. But not everyone felt gratitude. The nobles gathered later that night, their voices sharp and filled with anger. "This cannot be allowed. If the princess lives because of human blood, then she is no longer pure. Our traditions forbid this. The throne will be tainted," another hissed, "and worse. The people will look to him as a savior. If the queen accepts him, we lose our power." Plots began to take shape. Shadows moved quietly through the palace, preparing for betrayal. Back in her chamber, the princess drifted between sleep and waking. Each time she opened her eyes, she saw the warrior at her side. He did not leave. His hand rested on the hilt of his blade, ready to protect her from threats unseen. She felt safer with him than she had with anyone before. In her dreams, she felt his blood coursing within her. It was strange and powerful, giving her strength she never knew. Her body was no longer only alien, it was something more, something new. The queen watched the human warrior closely. Her heart was torn between gratitude and fear. Gratitude for the miracle he had given, fear for what this meant for her people. For if the princess's life was now tied to human blood, then their destinies were forever bound together. The princess opened her eyes once more and whispered to her mother, "Do not fear. I feel it. His blood is not a curse. It is hope." The queen pressed her hand gently, trying to believe. The warrior stood silently, his expression hard. He knew this was only the beginning. healing her had saved her life. But it had also painted a target on his back. Already, he could sense the hostility in the eyes of the nobles. Already, he knew enemies would rise. But he also knew something else. The bond created this night was unbreakable. His blood flowed in her veins, and her life was tied to his. Whatever storms came next, they would face them together. The blood that saved her had done more than heal. It had forged a destiny, one that no one could undo. The princess slept for many hours after the human's blood saved her. But when she woke, the weakness in her body had lessened. She could breathe without pain, her chest rising with more strength. Her golden eyes carried light again, and though her body was still fragile, the spark of life had returned. The queen sat beside her, holding her hand. The healers stood at a distance, whispering among themselves. Their reports confirmed what they feared and wondered at the same time. The human's blood had merged with hers. It was no longer foreign inside her body. It had become part of her. The warrior stood in the shadows near the window, his tall frame silent, watching the room like a guard. He had not left her side since the night he gave his blood, though his hand was bandaged. He showed no concern for his own wound. His eyes were always scanning, ready to strike at anyone who threatened her. When the princess stirred, her gaze searched the room until it landed on him. She spoke softly, her voice still weak. "You stayed." The warrior stepped closer, his deep voice calm. "Yes, I stayed. Until you are strong again, I will not leave." The queen watched silently. Her heart caught between gratitude and unease. The bond forming between them was not natural. Not in the eyes of her people, yet she could see it already. The princess looked at the human with a trust she had never shown to anyone else. The days passed slowly, and with each sunrise, the princess grew stronger. Her laughter returned in small moments, and the glow in her cheeks gave hope to the palace. But one truth became clear. Her strength only grew when the warrior was near. When he left the chamber, her body weakened again. When he returned, her heart steadied and her breath grew firm. The healers were baffled. Her body depends on his presence. One whispered, she responds to his blood, his energy, perhaps even his spirit. The queen's hands trembled as she heard these words. The bond was deeper than blood. The princess did not deny it. One evening, as the torches flickered, she looked at the warrior and said softly, "When you are here, I feel alive. When you are gone, it feels as if something inside me fades." "Why is this so?" The warrior hesitated, his jaw tight. "Because my blood runs in your veins now. Perhaps it ties us together. Perhaps it was fate." The princess lowered her gaze, but a faint blush touched her cheeks. She had never felt so safe with anyone, not even among her own people. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing hour, not only of body, but of spirit. Yet in the shadows of the palace, danger brewed. The nobles whispered in secret chambers, "She is bound to a human. This is dangerous. If she takes the throne with him by her side, our traditions will die." They began to scheme, plotting ways to separate the warrior from the princess. But the warrior was not blind. He could feel the stares that followed him in the halls. He could hear the whispers when he passed. His hand always rested on the hilt of his blade, ready to defend the princess if treachery rose. One night, as the princess sat by her window, she saw him sharpening his weapon in silence. The firelight danced across his scarred face, and for the first time she asked him about his past. "You have fought many battles, haven't you?" He nodded slowly. "To many. I have seen war take everything, friends, brothers, even peace. But I survived. Perhaps it was so I could be here now." The princess's heart stirred. She saw not only a warrior, but a man carrying endless pain and endless strength. She whispered, "Then maybe your battles were not for nothing." maybe they brought you to me." The warrior's eyes met hers. And for a moment, the silence between them said more than words could. It was not romance yet, but it was the seed of something powerful, something unspoken. The queen entered quietly and watched the scene. Her heart trembled with fear and wonder. She knew this bond would change the fate of her daughter and her world. The princess was no longer simply hers, nor simply alien. She was now tied forever to a human outside the palace. The people began to whisper of miracles. Some prayed in gratitude for the human who saved their princess. Others cursed his name, calling him a danger. A storm of opinion spread across the empire, but inside the chamber, the bond deepened. The princess smiled for the first time in weeks. The warrior stood guard, as always. And though danger loomed, there was an unshakable truth. They were no longer strangers. Their destinies were now one, bound by blood and by something greater than either of them could understand. The palace glowed under the twin moons. Yet inside its grand halls, shadows moved quietly. The princess was recovering, her strength growing each day. And her bond with the human warrior was no longer hidden. Servants whispered of how she smiled. Only when he was near, guards noticed how her heart grew steady in his presence. He had become more than her savior. He had become her shield. But not everyone saw this bond as a blessing. In the council chambers, nobles gathered in secret. Their faces twisted with fear and jealousy. One slammed his hand on the table and hissed, "We are losing her. She depends on him. A human, if this continues, our throne will no longer belong to us." Another leaned closer, whispering with venom, "The people will see him as her protector, perhaps even as her chosen. If the queen accepts this, we lose power forever." They spoke of tradition, of purity, of laws written in the stars. But beneath their words was greed. They feared not for the princess, but for themselves. The human was a threat to their control, and threats, in their eyes, could not be allowed to live. The queen sensed the danger, but said nothing. She had seen the glances in the council. The way their voices trembled with hatred whenever the warrior's name was spoken. She knew betrayal was stirring, but her heart was torn. Could she truly trust the very men who had guided her empire for years? Or should she trust the human who had given life to her daughter? The warrior himself was not blind. Each time he walked the corridors, he felt eyes following him. He could hear whispers in alien tongues. His instincts, sharpened by years of battle, told him the truth enemies were gathering. Not outside the walls, but within. He kept his blade close and his steps silent. He knew sooner or later someone would strike. The princess, though still weak, began to notice as well. One night, the chamber was quiet. She spoke softly to him. "They hate you, don't they?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "They fear what they cannot control, and fear turns quickly to hatred." She lowered her gaze, sadness filling her eyes. "If they hurt you, they hurt me, too. They do not understand our bond." He placed his hand gently on hers, his voice steady. "Then let them try. I have fought worse than whispers and shadows. I will not leave your side." But the danger was already close. That very night, a cloaked figure crept through the palace halls, slipping past guards. His hands carried a dagger laced with poison. His eyes burned with the promise of ending the human threat. He reached the princess's door silently. But before his blade could rise, the warrior stepped from the shadows. His sword flashed like lightning, and the would-be assassin froze as steel pressed against his throat. The princess gasped, her heart pounding. The queen rushed into the chamber, her guards following. The assassin was dragged to the floor, his hood ripped away. He was no foreign enemy. He was one of their own council. The chamber fell silent in shock. The queen's voice thundered with rage. You dare raise a blade against the savior of my daughter." The noble spat with defiance. "He is no savior. He is a curse. His blood taints our future. If he lives, our empire dies." His words spread like poison in the air. Some guards lowered their eyes, uncertain, but the queen stood tall. "Then know this, without him, my daughter would already be dead. Without him, we would have no future. If you call that a curse, then I welcome it." The warrior said nothing. He simply lowered his blade, his eyes hard as stone. He had faced assassins before, but what stung him now was not the attempt on his life. It was the truth that the greatest threat to the princess was not from beyond the stars, but from her own people. The assassin was dragged away. But the whispers did not stop. If anything, they grew louder. Spreading through the palace like wildfire, the nobles plotted deeper, more carefully. They knew force would not remove him. So they turned to lies and fear. Their voices began to poison the ears of the people, painting the human as a danger, a shadow that would one day consume the throne. The princess, hearing these whispers, felt a storm inside her heart. She looked at the warrior with tears in her eyes. "They will never stop, will they?" He shook his head slowly. "No, they will try again and again, but so will I. I will stand between you and their knives as long as I breathe." The bond between them grew sharper in that moment, forged not just by blood, but by shared danger. They both knew that their connection was more than healing. It was survival. It was destiny. But in the dark corners of the empire, the enemies within sharpened their blades and sharpened their lies. The battle for the princess's life was not over. It had only just begun. The palace was no longer a place of peace. Each hallway carried whispers. Each chamber hid secrets. The princess was stronger now, her cheeks warm with life, her golden eyes bright once again, yet everyone knew it was not alien medicine that saved her. It was the human's blood. The healers, after long studies, gathered before the queen. Their voices carried both awe and fear. "Your Majesty," one said, "we can confirm it. The princess's body has fully merged with human blood. Her life is now bound to his. The warrior dies, she will not live. If he bleeds, she feels it. If he falls, she falls with him." The queen's face turned pale. Her heart trembled as she looked at her daughter. She had prayed for life, and life was given. But at a price no one had expected. The princess listened in silence. Her hands tightened around the blanket. She did not look afraid. She looked at the warrior, her eyes steady. "So it is true. I live because of him. My breath comes from his blood. My life is tied to his." Her voice carried strength that made the healers bow their heads. The warrior, standing close by, remained calm. He did not flinch at the words. He had known from the moment his blood touched her lips that something greater had been forged. He spoke softly, his deep voice steady. "Then so be it. If my life is hers, I accept it. I will not let her fall." But outside the chamber, the truth spread like fire. Some called it a miracle, praising the bond as a gift of the stars. Others shouted it was a curse, proof that the princess was no longer pure. Fear and anger began to twist through the empire. The people were divided. The nobles wasted no time. They gathered in the council halls and spoke with venom. "She is no longer one of us. She is half human now. Her blood is tainted. If she rules, our empire is finished." Another hissed, "And worse. Her life is tied to his. If he commands her, then he commands us all. This must be stopped." Plots deepened, shadows moved in silence. Their hatred sharpened with every hour. The princess, unaware of the full danger, sat by her window and spoke to the warrior. "Does it trouble you that my life depends on yours?" He shook his head, his eyes firm. "No, it only means I will fight harder to live. I have survived every battle thrown at me. I will not fall now, not when you need me." She smiled. Faintly, "Then I am safe, because you are unbreakable, but in the stillness of night." The truth weighed on her. She thought of the throne, the crown she was meant to wear. She thought of her people who would never accept this bond. She thought of her enemies waiting in the dark, and for the first time. She wondered if her life had been saved only to throw her into greater storms. The queen entered quietly and sat beside her. Her voice was heavy with worry. "My child, do you understand what this means? If he is harmed, you will die. If he leaves, your heart will fail. Your fate is bound forever. Are you ready for such a path?" The princess met her mother's eyes without fear. "I was ready for death. Now I am ready for life. Whatever bond ties me to him, I do not see it as a curse. I see it as hope." The queen's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to believe. Yet her heart carried fear for the future. The warrior stood silently in the shadows. He heard every word. His jaw tightened, for he knew the queen was right. The bond had made him not just her protector, but her lifeline, and in this empire filled with enemies, his death would be the easiest path for those who wanted her gone. That night he sharpened his blade under the pale moon, his thoughts heavy. He had fought for nations, for comrades, for survival, but never before had he fought knowing that one life, fragile and precious, was tied to his heartbeat. He vowed silently, "I will not fail her, not while I draw breath." But far away in the dark chambers of the council, another vow was made. The nobles raised their hands and swore, "The truth cannot be allowed to spread further. The bond must be broken if the princess refuses. Then the human must die only. Then will our throne be safe." The unthinkable truth had been revealed. And with it came a storm. The princess and the warrior were bound by life and death, united by blood and fate. But in the shadows of the empire, blades were already being sharpened, waiting for the moment to strike. Asterisk. The sun rose over the alien capital, its light spilling across towers of crystal and steel. But inside the palace there was no peace. The unthinkable truth had spread. The princess's life was bound to the human warrior. Her strength came from him, her survival tied to his blood. The people were divided. Some called it a miracle. Others cursed it as blasphemy. And in the council chambers, whispers of rebellion grew louder with every hour. The queen stood before her throne, her face heavy with sorrow. She had ruled with wisdom for many years. But now her empire trembled on the edge of chaos. Before her gathered the nobles, their eyes sharp, their words like poison. One shouted, "She cannot rule. She is no longer one of us. Her blood is corrupted. She is tied to that human, and through him, our empire is enslaved." Another hissed, "End this bond, or end them both." The queen's heart burned with fury. But before she could speak, the great doors of the chamber opened. The princess entered slowly, her step steady, though her body was still fragile. Behind her walked the warrior, silent as stone, his hand never far from his blade. The chamber grew silent as their presence filled it. The nobles muttered among themselves. But the princess raised her hand, and their voices died. Her golden eyes shone with strength. Her voice carried through the hall. "You call me corrupted. You call me tainted. But hear me now. Without him, I would already be dust. Without his blood, your princess would be a corpse. He is the reason I stand before you. And if you call that a curse, then I will carry it proudly." The nobles shouted in anger. "He will control you. He will control us all. The throne cannot belong to a human." The warrior stepped forward then, his deep voice cutting through the chamber. "I seek no throne. I seek no crown. I am no ruler. I am a soldier. My only vow is to protect her, nothing more." But the nobles did not believe. Their fear was stronger than reason. One drew a hidden blade and shouted, "Then you will die here, human!" He lunged forward, but before his strike could land, the warrior's sword flashed. The clash echoed through the chamber. Guards rushed in, chaos erupted. The princess cried out, "Enough!" Her voice shook the hall like thunder. The glow of human blood within her veins flared bright. Her body trembled with strange power, and the crowd fell silent in awe and fear. She stood tall, her golden eyes blazing. "Listen to me. I am your princess. I am your heir. I lived because of him. His blood flows in me, and because of it, I am stronger. I am not less. I am more. If you reject me for this, then you reject your future." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Even the queen stared at her daughter with wide eyes, for in that moment she was no longer fragile, no longer weak. She was reborn. The warrior looked at her, pride hidden behind his calm face. He had seen leaders before, but never one who carried such fire. He whispered under his breath, "She is no longer just a princess. She is a queen in the making." The council trembled. Some lowered their heads. Others clenched their fists in rage, but the choice had been made. The princess had claimed her bond openly. The human was no longer her secret protector. He was her declared shield, her blood-bonded warrior. The queen rose from her throne and placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "So it shall be," she declared. "If her life is tied to his, then so is our empire. Any hand raised against him will be a hand raised against me." The words echoed across the palace. The guards struck their spears against the floor. The people in the streets cried out in shock and awe. The empire was forever changed, but as the sun set, shadows gathered once more. The bond had been declared. The choice had been made, but far beyond the palace walls enemies stirred. For an empire tied to a human would face not only enemies within, but enemies across the stars. And so the story of the dying princess had turned into something greater. A story of blood, of destiny, of a bond no law could break. The princess and the warrior stood together, bound as one, ready to face whatever storm the galaxy would bring. For the choice had been made, and it had changed everything.